I mean, you talk about no deal. I mean, the reality is we've left the European Union and we've left it with a deal that was negotiated. You know, with regard to our future relationship, obviously that's something that currently those talks are underway. We remain very committed to the timeline that we've set out to conclude those by the end of this year. What I can say is, you know, David Frost, our chief EU negotiator on behalf of the Prime Minister, was in touch with his deputy counterpart last week and with Michel Barnier, his direct counterpart this week, to make sure that we have a timeline in place for this phase of the negotiations, which obviously can happen over video conferences, and texts and legal agreements are being exchanged between the EU and ourselves. So I'm confident that that work can continue and hopefully reach a satisfactory conclusion. But we remain committed to the timeline that we've set out.
Welcome to the video, guys. Now, I've covered it a few times over the last couple of weeks, but the Remoaners, like I've said many times, are still not giving up on Brexit. They want to stop it at all costs, and the coronavirus, it seems, is their perfect excuse, even though, as I will show you in this video, it is actually failing, and miserably, because the government are not having none of it, and if reports are to be believed, might well be looking to leave on a WTO Brexit anyway. This of course has got the Remoaners right up in arms, including the head of the IMF and the snivelling shitweasel known as Sadiq Khan. So first we'll take a brief look at what the head of the IMF had to say, go over what the government's response to that is, and listen to little Sadiq Khan crying his eyes out to the arch-Remoaner James O'Brien. The Express article headlines, IMF demands Brexit transition extended as coronavirus panics world markets. Britain's Brexit transition period should be extended due to the growing economic uncertainty caused by the coronavirus crisis, the head of the International Monetary Fund has warned. Kristalina Georgieva said the UK and the EU should agree to push back the end date beyond December 31st to avoid making the current climate tougher. Her comments come after the IMF on Tuesday predicted the steepest downturn in the world economy since the Great Depression of the 1930s would happen this year. It is tough as it is. Let's not make it any tougher, Miss Georgieva, the IMF's managing director, told BBC Radio. Which is of course forgetting the fact that if we remain in the EU, we will have to help them bail out each other after this situation is done. Any extension puts us right in that realm if they're not already going to try and force it on us as it is, because we'll still be in the EU until at least December as it is. Which, to be honest, we don't really need to hear any more of what she's got to say. You get the gist of it. She's Remoaning as hard as ever, which is obviously no surprise to us. Now, upon hearing about this, the government have obviously countered, saying Brexit trade talks will not be delayed by coronavirus pandemic, as deal is needed to help boost economy, says number 10. Britain will not delay trade talks with the EU until after the coronavirus pandemic, Downing Street said today, which was actually yesterday. Officials said the UK needed economic flexibility to recover from coronavirus and that the government would refuse any EU calls for an extension to the negotiations. Number 10 said the government would not extend the transition period because the economy needed to be free of EU rules to recover from the impact of coronavirus. The UK is bound to EU trade rules until December 31st this year, while negotiations about future relations with the bloc are underway. We know that the talks have been stalled, we don't care about that. The Prime Minister's official spokesman told reporters today, we will not ask to extend the transition period, and if the EU asks, we will say no. Downing Street flatly rejected pleas from the International Monetary Fund to delay trade talks until after the deadly bug has passed, which is what we was just looking at a moment ago. The PM spokesman swiped back today, extending the transition period would simply prolong the negotiations, prolong business uncertainty, and delay the moment of control of our borders. It would also keep us bound by EU legislation at the point when we need legislative and economic flexibility to manage the UK response to the coronavirus pandemic. Because we've already seen what a shit show the European Union dealing with this is, imagine what it's going to be like over there when it's all said and done and the true cost is known. It's going to be biblical, and the EU might not even survive it. It says there the ministers are privately discussing possibility of a month-by-month basis renewal for the transition period, which the EU said won't happen, but we can't trust any of these people, in all honesty, on either side of the fence. Though the government at the moment, as I've said, and you can see here, are saying we are leaving at the end of the year, no questions asked. And in this article here, we have UK doubles down on Brexit threat. Hints, WTO terms offer more flexibility. In other words, it might be better for this country to leave on WTO terms, which will be good news for me and most of my viewers who have wanted this since last year. Boris Johnson's government doubled down on Thursday the 16th of April on its threat to walk away from the EU single market this year if a deal on a successor trade pact cannot be reached. It hinted that trading with the EU on WTO or World Trade Organization terms would give the UK more flexibility to manage the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, because we already know what a nightmare the EU's rules around state aid are, which is likely to be needed after this situation has finished. At a video conference between the EU and UK negotiating teams on Wednesday the 15th of April, UK Chief Negotiator David Frost repeated the government's determination to conclude a new trade deal with the EU before the end of 2020. So you can see there, the government are making it clear. The rest of this article's just talking about the IMF again, which obviously we covered with the first article. Now, like I said, the government has put its foot down, and rightly so. Not once, though, has the government pointed out that it was the democratic decision of 17.4 million people in this country to leave. It was solidified in 2019 by the election result, which gave the Tories an overwhelming majority to run the country and get Brexit done. This naturally sent Sadiq Khan and James O'Brien into complete shitfits. You can actually hear Sadiq Khan getting quite upset during his radio interview with the snivelling toad that is James O'Brien. It headlines here, Sadiq Khan calls for Brexit extension to let Brussels recover from coronavirus first, showing this snivelling toad is a representative of the EU, not of the UK, and, in my opinion, needs to be booted out of his position instantly. It's an absolute disgrace. Brexit negotiator David Frost's decision to rule out a delay to the transition period and move on to the next stage of the negotiations with the EU was criticised by Sadiq Khan, who claimed the government should allow the EU to recover from coronavirus first. Why do we have to do that? For what reason is that? Oh yeah, I know why. Sadiq Khan wants us to stay in the EU, doesn't he? Hated Brexit from day dot and has been salty as a motherfucker ever since 2016. Which is obviously something I've mocked many times on this channel. Now, we already know that the UK's chief negotiator said that's not going to happen. Speaking to LBC, London Mayor and Remainer Sadiq Khan said the decision beggars belief. No, you still being in a job is what actually beggars belief. Now, rather than reading through what it says there, let's actually take a listen to what he had to say.
No, you would have seen David Frost's comments, our chief negotiator, or, of course, a highly partisan unelected bureaucrat, to use another description, absolutely ruling out any prospect of the UK requesting an extension to the transition period as a result of COVID-19, and stressing that even if the European Union were to suggest that more time would be helpful in putting together something so potentially complicated and important, you just mentioned economic harm. Can you just comment on that? Do you think it's true? Do you think that they will crash out without any trading agreements in place whatsoever, just as we emerge from the biggest economic crisis that we've ever seen in peacetime?
Well, I think the government's putting dogma ahead of the national interest. I think no one anticipated when they voted for Brexit that the key negotiations would fall at a time when all governments are rightly focused on fighting a global pandemic. And the last thing we need as we try and get our way back from the devastation, that's been wreaked by coronavirus, is more chaos and uncertainty. And I'd urge David Frost and I'd urge the government to, for goodness sake, put political ideology aside and pursue the pragmatic route. And that means getting an extension. The pragmatic route is getting an extension so we and our European partners can focus on recovery from COVID-19 rather than, at a time when we are recovering from that, also have to deal with a no-deal Brexit. The idea that when we're all trying to deal with COVID-19, and by the way, I make this point not as a criticism, but the entire bandwidth of government is focused on this, as it should be. all of us are focused on this, as we should be. The idea you've got some slack in the system for civil servants to work on a deal with the EU is just not realistic, and neither has the EU, by the way. I'm not being funny. I don't want to get too emotional.
Very rarely are.
We've had thousands of people losing their lives, and we're going to still have, I'm afraid, thousands of more people losing their lives. And we've got a situation where the OBR are predicting a 30% drop in our GDP, and the idea we could at the same time be planning or not planning for a no-deal Brexit, it beggars belief, and I'm angry that David Frost and the government are embarking down this road when we're all trying to deal with COVID-19.
Right, well, he claims that the government is putting dogma ahead of the national interest, when no, clearly the national interest was getting Brexit done. They voted for it enough times now. It's not dogma, it's called honouring the democratic decision that was made 4 years ago. Not sticking up for the EU's interests, which is what you're doing. You heard him there say the last thing that we need as we try to make our way back from the devastation that's been wreaked by coronavirus is more chaos and uncertainty. Because of course, Brexit is always chaos and uncertainty, doom and gloom, and the worst things are gonna happen. Even though everything they predicted that would happen after the vote for Brexit has not come to pass, in most cases the complete opposite. Take the economy before the coronavirus. It was actually doing really well, completely rubbishing the claims of snivelling shitweasels like Sadiq Khan and James O'Brien here. And him moaning about thousands and thousands of people losing their lives and about more thousands losing their lives is true, but that is something that always happens. You can check a BBC article if you want, which actually shows that the coronavirus deaths are only listed as people who died after having the virus, not that it directly killed. I will link the article in the description if I remember, or put it up on the screen in post-editing. Either way, the numbers are not what they appear. Most of these people likely died because they were going to die anyway. What we really need to know is the amount that directly died because of this shit show. And I'll tell you something we don't need, snivelling toads like Sadiq Khan and James O'Brien, political point scoring and virtue signalling their way through life, but I think it's something we're going to have to get more and more used to as time progresses. Guys, worthless fuck pigs like Sadiq Khan and James O'Brien are certainly going to keep on remoaning, as will the head of the IMF. Hopefully Boris Johnson and his team tell them to do one and take us out on WTO terms, as one of those articles said is now much more possible, because it is certainly looking more and more likely that a WTO Brexit could be something we get. It's still not the most likely option out there in my opinion, but the chances are certainly increasing, which could be good news. Shame we have to deal with snivelling shitweasels like Sadiq Khan, but I guess you take the rough with the smooth. Now before I go, I've started doing live streams and uploading gaming content on my second channel. If you would like to come and join me for a live stream to chat in real time, have an interest in gaming related content on YouTube, or just want to follow me over there because you are a legend, the link will be down in the video description below and as a pinned comment. I hope to see you all there. Now as always, before I go, I want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.